Welcome to episode 54 successful demo, except that it wasn't because of complete royal fuck up by myself. I'm now forced to post this video, which is completely unusable. Whew, my goodness. I really haven't made a mistake this big, ever. So basically, to spoil things, what happened was I was recording a successful demo video featuring attitude adjustment and Lady Liberty. But I did not realize that Lady Liberty adds an agenda from HQ to your score area worth agenda points equal to the number of power counters. I thought it was advancement requirement. That's a big difference. I thought something like a project build would require 3 power counters to score, when in reality it only requires 2. So that changes everything, because I basically dedicated a whole video on the assumption that Lady Liberty was weaker than it actually was. So basically, the entire footage is unusable. But, well, since I've embarrassed myself enough on my channel, having, never mind, enjoy this royal screw up, and most importantly, towards the end, when I made the grand realization that I read this card wrong the entire time, revel in my shock, my utter dismay. I hope you enjoy it, as embarrassing as it is. I'm so sorry. We are going to cover an agenda shuffling card in attitude adjustment, as well as Lady Liberty. First off, the agenda shuffling card. Attitude adjustment really reeks of Jackson Howard for those of you who were around pre-rotation. If you remember, Jackson Howard, it's been a long time since we've played him, but he allows you to click to draw 2 cards, and if you RFG him, you can shuffle up to 3 cards from archives to R&D, and this typically includes a bunch of agendas. Attitude adjustment does exactly that, but in operation form. So you might think it's wholly superior, since you cannot trash attitude adjustment, whereas Jackson Howard is trashable for 3 credits. However, as you all know very well, every time you bring our Lord and Savior's name into the question, Jackson Howard, your replacement card had better be good enough to live up to the hype, and attitude adjustment is anything but. It is very much inferior to Jackson Howard for a couple of reasons. Firstly, even though attitude adjustment draws 2 cards like Jackson Howard, it's only a one-off draw. Drawing 2 cards for once is pretty mediocre. Because it's just not that much better than a single click to draw. Whereas Jackson Howard as an asset allows you to repeatedly draw and draw and draw, and that's where Jackson Howard's power comes into play. It stays on the table. It's a very efficient draw mechanic, such that it at the very least induces the runner to run Jackson Howard or archives to force Jackson Howard out of play. Attitude adjustment has no such thing. You play it once, it just draws 2 cards, that's it. It also does not reshuffle non-agendas, which is probably a bigger deal than you might think. A lot of times you are using Jackson Howard to reshuffle cards back into play to boost your economy. For example, reshuffling hedge funds, IPOs, and your bluff cards like NGO Front. The fewer of them in your archives, the more likely it is that you draw into one and install double advance 1, so you can sustain the mind games better. Whereas if you have 3 NGO Fronts in your bin, for example, the runner knows there are no NGO Fronts left in your deck. So yeah, Jackson Howard allows you to do all of that. Attitude adjustment doesn't make the cut. Its only real use is mitigating agenda flood, which is pretty good at doing, don't get me wrong. In fact, it can even pay out. It pays 2 credits for each agenda that you shuffle back in. So if you shuffle both the maximum of 2 agendas back in, you're making a profit. And that's about it, really. So you only play this card if your deck wants to score agendas mid to late game, or doesn't want to score agendas at all, and you want to and you don't want to lose to agenda flood. Right, so that's that card. We move on now to the more interesting card, which is Lady Liberty. Lady Liberty is a card that helps you score agendas in a very untraditional way. It gains a power counter every turn, and on each turn you can score an agenda from your hand of exactly equal number of advancement requirements as the number of power counters you have on Lady Liberty. So for example, Government Takeover has an advancement requirement of 9, so if you ever get Lady Liberty up to 9 power counters, you can score a Government Takeover from hand. Probably not gonna see that use case happen, but most agendas are smaller in the 2 to 5 advancement requirement range, so that's a lot more reasonable to score. One thing to note is that Lady Liberty is not single use. It doesn't trash after you perform the scoring with it. So as long as it stays on the table, you can keep scoring agendas that are bigger and bigger and bigger. And this reminds me of a certain festive song that I'm about to sing to you. Yeah, at the risk of completely embarrassing myself on the internet, but hey, I've been making YouTube videos for what, 4 years, 5 years and counting or something, and I've embarrassed myself countless times, so who cares, right? I mean, I just recently embarrassed myself by butchering Japanese on successful demo, so hey, anything goes. Right, so without further ado, let me present to you my rendition of 5 Days of Liberty. On the first day of liberty, my lady gave to me nothing. On the second day of liberty, my lady gave to me 15 minutes of fame and nothing. On the third day of liberty, my lady gave to me a plain old project BU, 15 minutes of fame and nothing. On the fourth day of liberty, my lady gave to me a sales team without the money, plain old project BU, 15 minutes of fame and nothing. On the fifth day of liberty, my lady gave to me food for us all. Sales team without the money, plain old project BU, 15 minutes of fame and nothing. Right, so the funny thing about that song, apart from my singing, is that it actually outlines pretty well the kind of game plan you want to have when you play a Lady Liberty deck. You want to score a 3, and then a 4, and then a 5, such that the 3 plus 4 plus 5 equals 7. Yeah, the maths doesn't add up, but you get the point. If you do this in NBN, the project build followed by a sales team and then a food is actually worth 7 agenda points. So if you score it that way, you don't need to score any agendas the hard way. All you need to do is Lady Liberty your way to victory. Now, all this while, I've been saying using Lady Liberty to score agendas. Well, I've been abusing this terminology somewhat because you're not actually scoring these agendas. You're simply adding them to your score area. So mechanically, this has a couple of implications. Most notably, you do not get to trigger the when scored effects of agenda, which is why in the song I mentioned sales team without the money. If you, for example, add sales team to your score area with Lady Liberty, you do not get the 10 credits on it. Because of this, you would probably want to run Lady Liberty in a deck where most of the agendas have no on-score effects. So looking at factions, I think NBN really is the most suitable for this because most of NBN's in-faction agendas generally suck. So you're typically playing agendas that are either project build or neutral agendas like Global Food Initiative that do not do anything when scored. So yeah, because of this, you know, Lady Liberty doesn't lose you too much of the agenda scoring effect. Whereas if you look at something like HB, you know, losing the effect of a powerful agenda like remote enforcement or something like a successful field test, you know, or in Jinteki, for example, if you're scoring a House of Knives this way, you don't get the House of Knives counters on it. So all the other 3 factions, you know, have a lot of powerful agendas that have good on-score effects. NBN doesn't really, and so lends itself pretty well to a Lady Liberty deck. One advantage of Lady Liberty is that it mitigates the advancement cost as well. I think this is a big downside that you'll find when playing with this sort of NBN agenda suite, is that every time you score a global food or a project build, you're losing a lot of tempo. You took 1 turn off to add agenda points to your score area, and a lot of resources as well. Lady Liberty, while costing your entire turn, does not cost any money to use its effect at all. So by scoring a project build this way, Lady Liberty saves you the 3 credits needed to advance it 3 times, as well as a click required to install project build. Sales team scored by Lady Liberty saves you even more, saves you 2 clicks and 4 credits. This way, Lady Liberty actually makes up for its horrendous rest cost, which we're going to talk about as one of its big downsides. It has a 5 rest cost, which is pretty ridiculous, combined with the region subtype. Now, this is an incredibly bad combo when paired together, because this asset needs to be very well defended. With a res cost that high, that doesn't pay off immediately. Don't forget, on the first day of Liberty, you get nothing out of Lady Liberty, so you actually need to defend this for at least 1 turn. If the runner accesses your asset that you spend 5 credits to res and trash it, you are coming out behind, so you need to protect this with ice. However, it's a region. You cannot defend this with defensive upgrade regions such as Mumbai City Grid, such as Navi Mumbai City Grid, and that's quite important. This means that it's very hard to keep your Lady Liberty intact for the number of turns required for it to pay off. And if you are thinking of mitigating the rest cost with Breaker Bay Grid, I'm sorry to tell you, there's a reason it was designed as a region. It's a nombo. You can only have 1 region in the server, so you can't have the Breaker Bay Grid region and Lady Liberty region in the same server. You have to pay the 5 rest cost the hard way. Not to mention that Lady Liberty further suffers from being a 1 per deck. You cannot build your deck around Lady Liberty because you cannot reliably ensure your to draw Lady Liberty every game. Sure, you could run 3 copies of Tech Startup, for example, to tutor for your Lady Liberty, but if the runner finds some way or means to get to your Lady Liberty and trash it, it's now in the bin. You have no more Lady Liberties to use. Good luck trying to win. So Lady Liberty is a good alternate win con, but it shouldn't be something that you are banking all your marbles on. Finally, it's truly and truly awful against Rumor Mill, more so than other unique upgrades or assets, because it takes up your scoring remote. The typical way to get rid of Rumor Mill is to score an agenda of your own, but how are you going to do that if your scoring remote is occupied by Lady Liberty? If you set scoring remote to score an agenda to remove Rumor Mill, guess what? You've removed Lady Liberty by overwriting it as well. All in all, Lady Liberty has a lot of drawbacks, so don't be surprised to see that it's not as good as you might think it is. Still, we are going to play it today. We're going to showcase it in an Azmari at Tech deck, and for some of you, you might find that this deck looks very familiar. That's because it is pretty much the same deck from the previous episode, the Agin Fusion Thimblerig deck, ported over to NBN. Some cards that you might recognize are Surveyor, Thimblerig as a one-off for my 15th Influence pip, as well as Scarcity of Resources as the countercurrent. Now, I know you're probably sick and tired of seeing Surveyor everywhere in Glacier decks, but it is really one of the best Glacier Ice around. Don't forget, we need to protect Lady Liberty, so we need good remote ice, and Surveyor does exactly that. I can promise you that this will shape out quite differently from the Jinteki version, which runs Ginger City Grid to stack those surveyors to insane heights. We are not playing Ginger Grid, so don't expect more than 3 ice on any given server. Surveyor is not going to go to insane ludicrous strengths. At most, it's going to be 4 or 6 strength. What we are leveraging on with Surveyor in this deck is the ability to punish the runner if they don't break all subroutines. Specifically, the first one, the Surveyor giving 2 tags to the runner. If they willfully ignore that subroutine and float the tags, we can punish them with our kill package, Hard Hitting News into Boom. Right? So the cards that we're going to present today, as mentioned, let's see how they come into play. Attitude Adjustment is a very nice safety valve in case you overdraw with Rashida and end up with too many agendas in your hand to score. This is pretty common considering that you are playing a small deck. 44 card deck, Rashida can easily overdraw you into too many agendas, and you don't really want to score that many of them, especially if you're still trying to set up your scoring remote. Attitude Adjustment puts them back into R&D so that you can score them later in a safer place. Lady Liberty, as mentioned, goes very well with the agenda suite. Unlike in the 5 Days of Liberty song, we are not playing 15 minutes because 15 minutes doesn't really fit into the agenda suite here. So we are just attempting to score a Bew followed by a sales team followed by a global food, and that's basically the plan to score if we get our Lady Liberty up. Of course, we could just score the agendas the old hard way as well. You see many Asmari decks running this exact agenda suite. Right, so with that said, let's head into the gameplay. Today we are up against Rotom Appliance. Now I'm not exactly sure which Rotom form I'm up against, but what I do know is I'm not a Rotom fan of smoke. That ID is disgusting and it slices through my sentries very easily. I'll have to Rotom heat things up very quickly and win before my opponent sets up. Now my opening hand doesn't lend itself to that at all. It has a Lady Liberty but no good economy early, which is exactly what I need. So I mulligan into 2 Rashidas and an NGO front. That is more like it. That's the money I'm looking for. But I can't really protect them, right? The only ice I have is a toll booth, and while I'm not averse to installing a toll booth as remote ice right off the bat, I'm more worried about my opponent simply running it and me not having enough money to rest said toll booth. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remote toll booth, click for a credit, and then install Rashida. Naming event for Azmari. If they play an event before running my server 1, like playing Show Gamble before running it, then I will get 2 credits off Azmari, which is enough to rest the toll booth. So that's my hope there. Thankfully, I didn't have to make the decision of resting toll booth at all because my opponent did not even run my remote. So I popped the popped the Rashida, and find myself flooded with everything but agendas. So there's a very awkward hand here. I find myself with a Surveyor, which by right should go on the remote, but being concerned about indexing and deep data mining and all the R&D nonsense that shapers have, I think I better put the Surveyor on R&D. It could serve me well later on. The second Rashida then goes into the remote, knowing full well that my opponent has no way to break a toll booth this early on in the game, and now they show me that they're on run-based smoke. They install a Paragon, the Desperado replacement that is so inferior. Now the Rashida finally draws me into agendas, a bit too many in fact. Rashida plus mandatory draw draws me into 3 of 4 agendas. So I have to decide between scoring food and scoring sales team here. I went with the food because I figured that food would be harder to score in the late game, even though sales team gives me more early economy and I almost always score the sales team before scoring the food. I think it will make my life a lot easier if I can play the never advance game going into the mid to late game where I just jam stuff into the remote every single turn and force them to play the guessing game, run my remote every single turn. I'm forced to pitch a lot of useful cards very unfortunately. This is not what I want to do at all, but I'm going to ditch both my agendas in the bin as though I have a Jackson Howard on the board, and I also ditch one of my bluff cards in NGO front. I'm not happy about this at all, but I need all the other cards. My opponent might be on employee strike, so I need to keep the scarcity. And I need every single credit I can get, so I keep the IPO, I keep the hard-hitting news, which is a possible win condition for me. Well, it would have been, but my opponent installed on the lamb. Bloody hell. That is super annoying to see because I would definitely fire the hard-hitting news here and force them to take their entire turn off clearing tags. 24 credits to 8 is a very good time to fire hard-hitting news. But I'm gonna do it anyway. Right? Because I don't think I can win against my opponent if I don't, keep the threat of hard-hitting news alive. So the first thing I do is to attitude adjust, get the 2 agendas out of my bin. That was a very brazen play by me. If my opponent ever ran archives for a Paragon trigger, they would have stolen 4 agenda points right off the bat. I was gambling they wouldn't do this because HQ was exposed, so they would always run HQ before running archives. And I was correct. They did not run archives and I was able to save my agendas with attitude adjustment, which drew me into my second hard-hitting news. So it made my decision pretty easy. I fired the first hard-hitting news, forced them on the lamb out of the way, and now that they're running again, I can fire a second hard-hitting news if I want to. Right? Because I've already cleared their tag protection. So yeah, with the second hard-hitting news in hand, it's a lot easier for me to, go for the hard-hitting news win condition, or at the very least, slow down my opponent. Now, here's the awkward thing though. They're gonna end their turn on a lot of credits. That's 11 credits. You would fire the hard-hitting news here. I still have the credit advantage, but if I fire the hard-hitting news here, I'll be investing a lot of my money into the trace, which means that I'll be out of IPO range. I really do want to play the IPO in my hand before dropping the hard-hitting news because it could be quite difficult to get up to 8 credits to play IPO again. I misclicked there. I didn't mean to change screens. So yeah, I'm really deciding between scoring the food now or playing the hard-hitting news. If I play the hard-hitting news now, I think I'll be down to exactly 8 credits. I still will be able to defend my remote. I can rest the toll booth on my remote, but I would be giving up my IPO money. So a lot of difficult decisions there. In the end, I decided that the best course of action here is to keep my opponent poor. So I looked at their influence spend. They have actually a lot of influence pips in the bin. A couple of paragons, a paperclip, on the lamb, peace in our time. So I figured that the restrictor card was not employee strike as it costs influence. Because of this, I felt safe playing scarcity simply as a econ denial card, right? Cost them 2 extra to install each resource. And then play hard-hitting news to deny the econ again. So they were forced to clear tags for the entire turn. So they lost clicks, they lost credits, they got down to 4 credits and have scarcity active. This is exactly where I want my opponent to be, as since they took their entire turn to clear tags, I was able to play my IPO. Now I can defend my remote, and now they are poor. This is looking very good for me. It would be really nice if I could follow up with a third hard-hitting news here, but unfortunately, attitude adjustment does not allow me to reshuffle hard-hitting users back into my deck, so I have to bank on drawing my third one, which I don't. I top deck a Bill, so it's time to start scoring agendas. Right, we are going to, you know, the hard-hitting users have done their job, even though I'm not able to follow up with a meat damage flatline. I'm able to slow my opponent down enough, force them to spend a couple of turns on recovery so that I have a window now to score my agendas. I scored the global food there, and now with the build and sales team in hand, you would think that the correct play here is to install Lady Liberty and to score them using Lady Liberty, and I really wanted to do that, trust me. However, Lady Liberty takes 4 turns to get there. 4 turns, that's very, very long. I could get there in 3 turns by scoring the build and the sales team the hard way. So this is why I did not use Lady Liberty, because I needed to win fast. My opponent is setting up their rig very fast. They're getting their money up, they have Net Mercure ready to go, and they already have a breaker in Dagger. If they find a Refractor, I'm done. This remote isn't looking good at all. So I need to pump out the win before my opponent draws through the deck. They're still only halfway through the deck. They might not have seen the Refractor or the SMC yet. I could just steal a cheesy win at this point by scoring the sales team from the remote. Right? So that's the problem with Lady Liberty. It's a tad too slow. Even though it keeps your agenda safe in hand, yeah, you are not going to win as fast as you like, and against smoke you need to go fast. The other problem is the agendas are not necessarily safe in my hand. If my opponent sees the Lady Liberty ticking up and feels like they cannot contest the Lady Liberty for one reason or another, they'll just run my HQ instead to steal the build and the sales team. And all I have on HQ, defending HQ, is a measly pop-up window. So this is why I did not feel safe playing Liberty at all. You need to have your HQ safe and guarded very well. You also need your remote to be safe and guarded, and you need to be able to spend the 4 turns waiting for Lady Liberty to tick up, which I just couldn't afford in this scenario. Right? I'm now going to threaten the win on sales team, but my opponent has finally found a Refractor in SMC, so they are going to run my remote, install Paperclip from the bin to break IP block, and then install Refractor to break my innermost toll booth to steal my agenda. So unfortunately I wasn't able to rush out the win, but at least I got halfway there, right? My build was scored safely. It was just the sales team that I wasn't able to push out. That's completely fine. There are still 2 more project builds in my deck. There's still a Lady Liberty in my hand. I can still make things work. So the next line of play here would obviously be to jam the Lady Liberty in the remote, make them think it's a build, force them to run it. They do... I'm not sure if they know of the existence of Lady Liberty in my hand yet. Anyway, I'm going to draw up here to try to find my hard-hitting news, and I don't find it. But I do find my second project build, so I'm going to install it in the remote here. I think they do know the existence of Lady Liberty. They know it's in my hand. They have seen that card, and they chose not to trash it earlier. So they might be thinking that this is a Lady Liberty that doesn't need to be contested. Or they might think that anything could be a project build, I need to run it right now. So this is what I feel is a very big advantage of pushing out the project build the hard way versus using Lady Liberty as a proxy, because pushing out the build the hard way gets me to match point and allows me to threaten my opponent, force them into running my remote, whereas Lady Liberty is a very passive card that you can afford to let tick up a couple of turns. Right, so here my opponent runs R&D, trying to make me poor. I rest the Enigma to make that a bit more taxing. Then they start running HQ. I'm gonna bluff my opponent here, make them think that it's the Lady Liberty in the remote by thanking them for activating my pop-up window, bringing me up to 5 credits, which is the number of credits needed to res the Lady Liberty. They access a boom from my hand, which is pretty irrelevant at this point, trashing it, and now they have to make the decision of whether to run my remote or not. Make no mistake, they look really poor, a bit too poor to contest my remote, but with all the running they have done up till now, they have 7 credits on bankroll, which is a paid ability to trash to gain 7 credits. So they do actually have access to a lot of money, and they are going to contest my remote. They are going to steal this bill. Ooh, oh well. Well, he won Euros for a reason, right? This guy is good. Alright, so he stole my bill, putting him at 4 agenda points to my 5. So what are my outs now? I could jam the Lady Liberty here. I could try to dig for my 3rd copy of Project Bill to jam in the remote. Or I could money up and try to make a thick remote with Surveyor, but that's not looking very likely against Smoke. Dagger is very efficient against Surveyor. So looking at our credit differential, I'm on 5 credits, they're on 1. I think the most logical move here is actually to attempt to draw into my last hard-hitting news. A hard-hitting news right now would be pretty painful. I need to be careful. They have 4 credits on Net Mercure, so they are richer than it seems. So I attempt to draw into the hard-hitting news using my 2nd attitude adjustment, which did not get me there. It drew me my 2nd boom, but not my 3rd hard-hitting news. So with only a Rashida, hey, that's not a bad card. That can masquerade as a bill. Let's put it in the remote. Once again, in a situation where I had Lady Liberty in my hand, I found myself playing another card in the remote instead. Lady Liberty is too expensive. I'm on 6 credits, I can't afford to res Lady Liberty to put me down to 1. That's too poor. Rashida, on the other hand, gives me instant draw, instant money, everything I could ask for. So Rashida is just better than Lady Liberty. I don't want Lady Liberty hogging my remote while the Rashida sitting in my hand doing nothing. So already I'm seeing the downsides of Lady Liberty. There were so many opportunities where I could have jammed Lady Liberty in my remote. And trust me, I was thinking of doing that multiple times. But every time that decision point came up, there was just something better to jam in. In this case, the Rashida was superior. It could draw me into Bill, it could draw me into hard-hitting news. Yeah. Lady Liberty can wait. And it's the same thing over and over again. When I had the Bill and Sales Team in my hand, I said, well, Lady Liberty can wait. I can use it later as something to jam in the remote. Let me get these agendas out before my opponent sets up their rig. Same thing here. Let me get this Rashida going before committing to 3 or 4 turns with Lady Liberty. So my opponent indexes me here, which is pretty surprising, but not that surprising considering that I'm too poor to threaten any meaningful ice. And as they index, they find themselves with 2 corporate sales teams in the top 5 cards. So that's enough agendas to win them the game. And now they're just calculating to see whether they have enough credits to get through my R&D twice. They sure do. With 5 credits on Net Mercure, it's no problem for my opponent to run my R&D twice at all. Maybe I could have put up some resistance if I place a 3rd ice on R&D, pumping up Surveyor strength to 6. That would require 2 stealth credits for Dagger to break, instead of 1. That may have been the deal breaker, but you know, it is what it is. I don't think I really could have stopped my opponent once they were able to lock my remote. Multiple times I tried to jam stuff in the remote, the Never Advanced Project Bill and then the corporate sales team, and my opponent kept stealing from my relatively well defended remote time and again. Yeah, it just so happens that Smoke's Breaker Suite does very well with the likes of Tollbooth, with the likes of IP Block and Newshound and Surveyor. There's not much better I could have done to defend my remote. This was just not a very good matchup. I think the hard-hitting users were the way to go, but my opponent had the correct tech card on the Lamb that mitigated the tempo loss from the early hard-hitting news. So credit to my opponent. They played very well, and they were able to mitigate the tag threat, set up their board state in a way such that they can contest my match point agenda. I was on 5 points for most of the game, but I just never could close out against the remote locking Smoke. And that was the game, as my opponent ran through R&D twice to steal the 2 sales teams that they have shuffled onto the top of my deck. Yeah, they even floated tags with Surveyor, which was really nice to see. Too bad I never get to fire the boom here. Of course, they win before I can take a turn. So I know a lot of you will probably be complaining at this point. How can you call this a successful demo of Lady Liberty if I didn't even bother playing her when I had her in my hand the entire game? Well, as I mentioned during the video, the fact that time and again, during those decision points where I could have installed Lady Liberty, I simply had better options available to me. I could score agendas the hard way and win sooner. I could install Rashida and get money and get more cards to help me defend my remote instead of letting a Lady Liberty loose on my remote that is going to hog up my remote for the rest of the game. It's I mean I don't even think it was close. I think I was able to justify the decisions I made over installing Lady Liberty, and I stand by them being correct, which is an indicator in itself that Lady Liberty just isn't that strong. And not only that, not only is Lady Liberty weaker than the rest of the cards in my deck, it also is weaker than some of the other options available in the card pool. Throughout this entire game, when I was staring down the Lady Liberty in my hand, I was thinking, you know, she could have been an MC austerity policy instead, and I would be much happier to install it. Sure, Lady Liberty has some upsides over MCA. It is not single use, meaning that you can score a potentially unbounded number of agenda points with Lady Liberty, whereas with MC Austerity, you only score one agenda. It also doesn't cost influence and doesn't die to anti-fast advanced tech such as Clot, such as the Source. However, on the other hand, MC Austerity provides so much more that makes it just such a much better agenda scoring asset than Lady Liberty is. It defends itself by forcing the runner to do a click, which is very relevant if you are playing Fairchild 3 in the deck as well. It also provides a much more flexible scoring plan. With Lady Liberty, if the correct agenda isn't in your hand when you have the correct number of power counters, you're done. Your scoring window is gone. Take note that the addition of power counters on Lady Liberty is not optional. For example, if you're trying to score a Project Build that's worth 3 advancement counters, when you have a Lady Liberty with 3 power counters on it, if the build is not in your hand, tough luck. You cannot score a build with Lady Liberty anymore, because she will move on to 4 and above the next turn and after, and if you draw the build after that, you cannot score it with Lady Liberty, because it needs to have the exact same number of Oh, I misplayed this. It's agenda points.